All right, this is the last lesson of 8.5. Now we're going to solve and we're going to factor out the GCF. Now you can see what I have written above it in blue. Take that down, very important. We established the last video using the whole zero product property. If you have one term that's zero, and if you're multiplying, well then that just makes everything else zero. So we can only solve these equations if the equation equals zero. I want to use that zero product property. So if it's set equal to like 5 or 6, we really can't do anything with it. Now if you look at 1, 2, and 3, they're already set equal to 0. So I don't have to do anything to that. Alright, so let's do number 1. Now same thing, we want to factor out the GCF. The GCF, let's write this down, the GCF for this one, if we have 8 and 40, okay, we use mental math, 8 and 40, the biggest number that goes into it is 8. And each of those terms have an x. We have an x squared and an x. You take the smallest exponent, so it's just x. So 8x is the GCF. Now since we have two terms, I'm going to have two terms inside here separated by a minus, because that's what's originally given to us. Okay, then we're asking ourselves, all right, 8x times what quantity is going to give us 8x squared? Well, that's just going to be x. All right, 8x times x is 8x squared. Then we're asking ourselves, 8x times what quantity gives me 40x? So let's see here, 40 divided by 8 is 5. And I don't have to have an x. Well, I know there's an x here, but I already pulled out an x, so I don't have to have an x here. So that's it. We know how to do that. We factored out the GCF before, but now I just set it equal to 0. So now we're at the same exact step from the previous section. I have my two factors, 8x and x minus 5. I just set them equal to 0. So I'm just going to take 8x, set it equal to 0. So if I divide by 8, I know x is going to have to equal 0. That's one of the solutions. This is my other factor. So I take x minus 5, set it equal to 0. Then I just add 5. So 0 plus 5 is 5. So I get x to equal 5. So those are the two answers right there. So factor out the GCF, then take each factor, set them equal to 0. Let's see here. Let's do number 3. Now, again, I always look at this first. Equation is set equal to 0, so I can go right to the GCF. Okay, if I look at GCF, let's see, we have 3 and 9. Biggest number that goes into 3 and 9 is 3. And since each of those terms have an n, if we have n squared and n is the smallest exponent. So we're going to pull a 3n out. Then we're going to put our parentheses. It's got to be set equal to 0. Since it's a minus, I have a minus on the inside. We're going to fill in the blanks. So then, let's see here. 3n times what quantity is going to give us 3n squared? Well, it's just going to be n right there. So we just get n. And then we ask ourselves, 3n times what quantity gives us 9n? Well, this 9 divided by 3 is 3, so I just have 3. And again, I already pulled out an n, so I don't have to put an n with the 3. So most of our work is done. I take each factor, set it equal to 0. If 3n equals 0, we know we divide by 3. 0 divided by 3 is still 0. That's one solution. And then if I take the n minus 3, set that equal to 0. Then if we add 3 to get n by itself, n equals 3. That's our second solution. Okay? Let's do one of the last three. Let's look at number 5. Now number 5, this is the main thing to look at. This equation is not equal to 0. I want to get every single term on one side of the equation. Now let's move everything over to the side that has either the x squared, or in this case for number 5 it's the n squared. So let's move this over. Now since that's a positive 28n, to get rid of it and to get it to equal 0, I have to subtract 28n. So that cancels out, so it's set equal to 0. And I have to do the same thing to the left side, subtract 28n. So the left side is going to be 7n squared minus 28n. Now it looks like 1, 2, and 3. So now I do the same thing I've been doing. I'm going to look for a GCF. Let's move this up so I have some more space. Okay, the GCF for this, all right, 7 and 28. Biggest number that goes into both is 7. And if I have n squared and n, well, n is going to be in the GCF. So we pull the 7n out. Okay, again, I have this minus. I'm going to have a minus here. Okay, then I ask myself, all right, 7n times what quantity gives me 7n squared? Well, that's just going to be n. And then I ask myself, 7n times what number gives me negative 28n? This is going to be negative 4. And if you distribute it, it's going to equal the 7n squared minus 28n. Then we just take the two factors, set them equal to 0, so 7n equals 0, and n minus 4 equals 0. We know this, you divide by 7, 0 divided by 7 is 0. Here you add 4 to each side, so 0 plus 4, we get n to equal 4. Alright, so all these, we did get 2 solutions. It doesn't turn out that every time you do get 2, but the main thing when you solve, the very first step is this, that the equation must be set equal to 0. So for 4, 5, and 6, you have to do a little bit of rearranging, and then once it's set equal to 0, factor it by taking out the GCF, and then set the factors equal to 0.